Hello, students. Welcome to your discussion for science and tech and general knowledge in your simulator zero test. The way that the test is designed is to check not only your factual knowledge but also how you apply yourself in the paper. We are going to look at not just the content in the test but also what are the preparation strategies for different elements that you're tested upon in the prelims examination. Is going to help us behave in certain ways that set us up for success in the actual exam. In order for us to ensure those behaviors, some amount of preparation has to happen in the non-test conditions also. So treat these tests as a diagnostic tool to figure out what sort of refinement is necessary, what course correction is necessary for your prelims preparation. All right. So let's look at the first question. Nihon Hindankyo, a well-known Japanese organization, was recently seen in the news because now it is a current affairs-based question for sure, right? It is also a name matching, right? A context matching or key term matching type of pattern that is being asked. Now, in this question, it is dependent upon whether or not you recognize this name or not, right? So recognition of that name is necessary. If you feel a difficulty in recognizing names which are not in languages that you're comfortable in, what are the strategies that you use, right? Number one is, I would want you to read this carefully. What happens is, whenever you're doing prelims preparation or UPSC preparation in general, our eye tends to skip over material that you're reading. So if you're reading a very large compilation of current affairs, if you're reading your notes again and again, and it's like your 10th revision of that same material, what tends to happen is that you don't read that material linearly, right? You see this, okay, I identify, and then your eye just jumps. If that is happening to you, then word matching is going to feel a little bit difficult. So what I need you to do is, I need you to read this carefully. I would want you to enunciate the name properly. Nihon Hindankyo, right? If you say it properly, then there is a higher chance that your mind will recognize this name in the future. All right. So if you read these things carefully, it will be easier for you to recognize that, yes, this is something that I have learned. This is something that I read in context of the Nobel Prizes. All right. So it was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for its efforts in global nuclear disarmament. Now, the pattern of the question is such that the name that has been matched and the answer is A itself. That means that if you have a lot of conviction, you will read this, you will finish reading this, and the question will get finished very quickly. So if such questions are asked from content that will be well read, which will be covered by students, then this question is something which will make your paper easier. All right. So when we look at the difficulty level of a paper, we do tend to see how many of such questions have been asked. All right. Now, the method of attempting these questions. Preparation, I talked about that whenever there's a word that you don't recognize in your language of fluency, it is necessary that you enunciate, that you pronounce, that you read out the name properly. If that has happened, then the context matching will be easier. But in the exam, I do want you to read the rest of the question also. If you're reading the rest of the question also, there, mentally, the exercise that has to be is you have to validate your thoughts. So it partnered with the World Bank to fund projects in small island developing states in the Pacific Ocean. Having read this, you have to train your mind to react that, okay, this is the sort of thing that the Global Climate Fund would be doing, right? Or maybe the Global Environment Facility would be doing, right? So this is something that GEF or GCF would do. Right. So at least I have an answer that, okay, this is wrong and I have a reason why, right? That will help you have more conviction in the exam. Then it made significant breakthrough in developing a new structural system for tsunami resistant buildings. Now, why we're giving you this option is that you will read tsunami, you will read something Japanese and you'll want to associate with it. But again, you have to ask yourself, have I read anything about it in my current affairs, right? If you have not studied, answer in your mind that no, I've not studied anything like this. Right? And if this was so, you would have, if you have the sort of conviction that, okay, I have studied environment current affairs properly, right? If I have studied environment current affairs properly, if something like this would have happened, though I would know, right? So then even not studied will put you in a position that, okay, I'm not exposed to such an information, right? Then it pioneered the development of transplant tissues for treating diseases like Parkinson's and diabetes, right? Now, Parkinson's, degenerative disease, diabetes, one of the organ and one of the autoimmune, right? So two types of these diseases have been said. Now the question is, can I transplant tissues to treat these diseases, right? And is it that such an organization was well known because of this reason? Again, not studied, and again, this does not feel very logical to me, this portion. Had this option not been there, then I would have to worry about the things that I have not studied. But because this option is there, because it is something that you will have a reference to, this question can get finished faster. All right. So not only am I requiring you to know the answer, I also need you to train yourself to read the questions properly so that you're understanding what are the things that you need to study. Right? Because see, in the actual exam, not only do you need to know the answer, you also need to have conviction, right? You have to sort of, placate yourself that, okay, this is the answer and I'm okay, right? So that aspect is necessary. What is left here is what Nobel Prizes it is required for you to study. I want you to study Nobel Prizes for 2024, 2023 and 2022. At least these, it is necessary that you're going to study. Now, this is from all of the countries, right? Whoever has gotten the prize, this you have to study. Apart from this, Nobel Prizes that Indians have received are also something which you have to study as part of static, no matter how old it may be, but you have to be aware of that. All right. So that is the topic of Nobel Prizes that must be covered here. In addition, other awards also you have to study, but that will be in context of a different question that I'll explain. All right. Now, from the science and tech section, your first question about this was about this thing. military exercises. So the question reads, which of the following statements about exercise Yudh Abhyas 2024 are correct? Now, you have to see what are the things that are correct. And in terms of hygiene, in terms of the way that you should solve the paper is, you say correct, you tick or cross what is there in every statement, and then you match it. All right. If you are in a position that you don't know this content very well, then this pattern will help you, because 1, 2, 3 elimination is helpful here. Okay. So this was a joint military exercise between India and the USA. Now, factually, this is correct, but I will explain what preparation is required in order for us to attempt this question. Because if you don't know, then guesswork is going to go haywire in such questions. So the exercise aims to enhance joint military capability of participating nations to undertake counter-terrorism operations. Now, this is factually correct, but whether or not you know is on basis of what you've prepared. The Indian Army was a part of this exercise. So the answer to this question is D1, 2, 3. But what I want to discuss with you is, how do you prepare this, right? In order to prepare this, what mentally is required of you is that you need to know exercise Yudh Abhyas, right? And in this, what are the facts that you need to remember? You need to know what is the type, bilateral, multilateral, whatever. So it is a bilateral exercise, right? Then you need to remember who are the participants. Apart from that, you have to know what are the forces. Now, participants means countries, right? Forces means what force, military, navy, air force, what is the part who are participating? What is the objective of the exercise, right? And what sort of terrain the exercise is held, right? So these are the 5 things that you need to remember about any exercise that you're studying, right? Now, in order for you to generate this in your mind, you need to have a table somewhere. So in terms of preparation, what is required is that you generate your notes for all of these different types of exercises. For that, you need to create a table in your notes in which I want you to write in your own hand. This is the country. This is the name of the exercise. Again, name and country can be interchanged, right? Then what is the type? So maybe I'm writing lateral here, bilateral, trilateral, whatever that I'm writing here. What are the forces? What is the aim? And I also tend to write special feature. Is there a distinguishing feature in that exercise? So somewhere you need to have these notes. If you're an online type person, I'm memorizing, right? You can group them by forces and you can group them by aims. The point is, it's a multi-layered process as to how you mug up this information and energy into learning this, right? What I'm telling you is that for you to learn purely factual information, it is helpful that you engage with that information in multiple layers, multiple levels. Step one is that I want you to create notes for your preparation. Write it down in your own hand. You will be able to collect this information from your current affairs sources. You will be able to collect this information from your test series sources. Why? Because number one is, step one is to check, okay, this question that has been asked, do I have this exercise written in my notes or not? Otherwise, this information is going to be scattered. You cannot know for sure whether you studied it or not. So if you have a list, you can check against it, okay, this is something that I read about or no. Step one. Step two is, I said that I want you to group them in different ways, right? So grouping means analysis. So if you're grouping them by regions and countries, that okay, American countries, these are the exercises that we're doing. European countries, this is what we're doing. African countries, this is what we're doing. So at least by country, at least by region, the names are going to feel familiar. That is one way. When you're grouping them by type, by little exercises, multilateral exercises, at least they set up in one particular group. So in certain questions, you will be able to eliminate. Okay, this one is for sure bilateral. Multilateral to nahi hoga is something that you can think, right? So for that grouping is necessary. Similarly, the more you engage with the groups, right? The more you engage with your table, the better your retention is going to be. Now, having learned that table in response to a question, this is what mentally my response looks like. I know that, okay, it's exercise Yudh Abhyas. Now I have to know what type is it? What participants are these? What forces are these? Now, if you remember this structure, that okay, these are the prompts, these are the elements that I have to remember. Whether or not the question is checking you, whether or not the question is going to ask you about all these aspects, these are the things that you can ask yourself. If you ask yourself, sometimes it is easier for you to articulate, sometimes it's easier for you to pick whether or not it is correct or not, right? Because if I said it is India and USA only, then it is a different question, right? For that, it is necessary that you need to know that it is a bilateral exercise. That's why only 2 countries is okay. Do you get it? Different levels of difficulty of question can be handled only if you have some other supporting information. All right. So that's why try and mug up to the best of your ability. But the best of my ability looks like this. All right. So that's how you force yourself to mug up this information. The answer for that question, question number 21 was D, 1, 2, 3. Next question. Consider the following activities. Now, in way of covering your question paper in time, right? Time management within the exam is also something that students tend to struggle with, right? So if your issue is time management, ma'am, I cannot read the entire paper in the time that is allotted. That means that there is something which is wrong, which is to be corrected in the way that you're reading the question. In questions in which I have more than 3 options, and they've asked me to consider the following, right? I have to read this. I need to jump to what they're asking for. And then I will tick or cross in these statements that have been asked. Again, the way, the pattern, the process of reading this question has to be, I read this first, consider the following statements. Then I have to read in how many of the above activities can nano bubble technology be used. I'm going to underline nano bubble technology. Then I have to read these statements and tick and cross. If you don't read this question like this, you will read all these things. While you're reading, you'll think of random things. Then you'll see, oh, I have to worry about nano bubble. You will read this again. right? Then you will see these statements, and then a lot of time has been wasted, because if you do this in every question, then you are spending a lot of reading time. All right, so I have to read what am I looking for. Now such questions get even more tricky if they ask me negative prompt here, if they're asking me not used. So sometimes in that processing, people tend to make silly mistakes. All right, I'll explain that in the context of a different question, but here consider the following activities. Where can nanobubble technology be used? Now, there can be two situations. Either you have studied nanobubble technology, or you would not have studied. Maybe you have only studied nanotechnology. Right? So if you've only studied nanotechnology, what you know for sure is that it is going to be bubbles at the nano scale. Right? After that, maybe you know, maybe you don't know. All right? So we go back to these statements, and now I have to read every statement and see whether or not nanobubble can be helpful here. So enhancing oxygen transfer efficiency in wastewater treatment. Number one, is there something that I studied about oxygen transfer in wastewater treatment? The answer is yes, because you read biological, this thing, dissolved oxygen, biologically available oxygen, all those things you study, right? So what is the oxygen availability, right? That is something that we study. Now, can a nanobubble help enhance oxygen transfer? A bubble of oxygen can help you have more oxygenation in the water. So this seems probable. So here I put a tick mark that, okay, it feels okay. Then, improving crop yield through increased nutrient absorption in plants. Now, is some sort of bubble helpful in the nutrient absorption in plants? Ask yourself, nutrient absorption happens where? At the roots, right? So if I want to have good absorption in the root, what do I need to have? More surface area, right? Roots are there to increase surface area. Now, sometimes you know that the soil has to be tilled, right? The soil, it should not be too compact. Some amount of air should be there. Porosity has to be maintained, right? So basically, you know that, okay, air around the roots is somewhat helpful. And it is not necessary that bubbles have to be in air only. Bubbles can be water also. Bubble can be nutrient also, right? So it can be used in something to do with nutrient absorption. This feels okay to me, so I'll make a different sign, right? That it feels okay, but I'm not sure. Assisting earthquake prediction by detecting movement of seismic waves. This I know for sure. When it has to do with earthquake, bubbles are not doing anything. So the way to check is that if nanobubble technology is going to be helpful, how is it going to help me do something in earthquake detection, right? So this does not seem likely. So this I am crossing. That earthquakes have to happen in solid, in the soil, in the mantle, in the crust, right? In the harder surfaces. If there are bubbles associated, that is going to act as a deterrent. It's going to act as a problem for me to see what seismic waves are generated. So 3 is so not happening. When 3 is not happening, that means all 5 is not going to be my answer. Yes. Then for enhancing drug delivery in targeted medical treatment. Now this feels okay to me. That if I have to send a particular medical treatment in some area, I can create a small nanobubble that can go and hit at the targeted site, right? So that I could imagine, okay. Then data encryption in cybersecurity. If I'm creating a small bubble, how will that work in cybersecurity? Cybersecurity has to do with software, right? Software has to do with coding. Software has to do with programming, right? Any type of nanobubble technology which is physical in nature is going to have a hardware orientation. So if they were talking about chip manufacture, if they were talking about cooling a supercomputer, there I could think of these things. But in software, I'm sure it cannot happen. So only 4 is also eliminated here, right? Now, I have to select my answer between only 2 and only 3. Oxygen transfer I have selected. Targeted medical treatment I have selected. Only crop yield I have to make a guess. I am selecting that, and that will bring my answer to only 3. All right. But what did we have to learn from this question? That there is a pattern in which reading the question is helpful. Do not just tick the answer all 5. Science and tech is usually all of the above. That is a bad idea. Every time you're trying to think of what are the ways in which a particular technology can be used, it is necessary that you ask yourself how. What is the application? Try and imagine that process. If you engage with the question, you will be able to at least come closer to the answer. All right. So that is the way that such questions have to be approached. Now, next question was 88. This technology. Now, you see this pattern. Again, a paragraph has been written. What is the way to attempt this question? You start reading AI-based technology. Yahan achanak se I want you to stop that. Okay. Then the paragraph is there. Jump to what has been asked. Which of the following emerging technologies is best described in the above passage? I want you to read the elements first. What are the options available? And here, the processing that has to happen is ask yourself, have you read this particular technology before or not? So digital twin. Now, I don't know if you've read this or not, but it is possible for you to infer the meaning. Digital twin means my twin in the digital world, right? Same as me. That is something that you can think of. Then augmented reality, yes, I've studied that on top of my reality, some overlay of the digital world can be put. Deepfake also, you've learned that, okay, it is a video that is created by, AI or some other technology, but it is a fake video which looks very real, deepfake. Virtual human modeling, something like digital twin, but only for human beings. That virtually the human being, the entire human being or part of human being is going to be, a model is going to be created, right? So first you see how many of these words do you recognize or not. Now, having had these impressions in your mind, having read this, now you have to read this and see how many identifying features you can see, right? So this reads this AI-based technology. So AI-based, all 4 feel AI-based, augmented reality, perhaps less AI-based. Okay, is capable of altering videos, images, and audio to create highly realistic but artificial representations of real people. So if it is artificial representation, augmented reality is not, because it is not about altering video, right? Digital twin cannot be, because again it is artificial representation. Right, and virtual human modeling also not artificial, right? Virtual human modeling is to be accurate to the actual sample. So that's why I'm sticking to deepfake right now. But it is necessary that you read the rest of the paragraph also. It utilizes machine learning models, particularly generative adversarial networks, to synthesize content that can be used for entertainment, misinformation and identity fraud. Now, identity fraud, again, gives me a link to what deepfake is. Right? So it will give you more conviction about what you have to write. But otherwise, it is helpful that you know what you're looking for. And then while you're looking for validation, you can tick or cross. Again, not a very difficult question, but it is something that will require you to apply yourself. Now, from test series, you also get elements to study. If you've not been exposed to what GANs are, this is your cue to pick up what they mean and what they don't mean. If any one of these is something that you were not aware of, test series is going to help you broaden your exposure to such elements. All right. Next question was in the context of space technology. The company is AST. Space Mobile, Link Global and SpaceX's Starlink, frequently mentioned in the news, are primarily what? Now, usually what happens is in the list of the three aspects, one of those companies you'll be able to recognize for sure. So Starlink, famously, I don't know if you were aware of at that time, during the beginning of the Ukraine-Russia war, the Ukrainians were saying that our internet has been blocked. So Musk gave the tweet that, okay, Starlink is active, you get the internet now. So because of which Ukraine was able to have such a high footprint in the digital world. Now, what this speaks to is that even though you can study current affairs from a lot of compilations, but this is a small thing, very small thing, that there was a tweet by Musk. This links to your exposure to current affairs. Meaning, if you've been reading the newspapers, if you watch the news, if you have exposure to current affairs, if you have exposure to the news, there are certain things that you will be aware of without studying, right? Meaning, if you've been reading the newspapers, if you watch the news, if you have exposure to current affairs, if you have exposure to the news, there are certain things that you will be aware of without studying, right? Whenever there's a word that So what I need to do is I need to read this carefully. I want to enunciate the name properly. Nihon Hin Dang Kyo. Right? If you say it properly, then there is a higher chance that your mind will recognize this name in the future. All right. So if you read these things carefully, it will be easier for you to recognize that, yes, this is something that I have learned. This is something that I read in context of the Nobel Prizes. All right. So it was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Read this. If you have not studied, answer in your mind that nothing like this would be able somewhere. So I want you to write. Right. So if your issue is time management, ma'am, I cannot read the entire paper in the time that is allotted. That means that there is something which is wrong, which is to be corrected in the way that you're reading the question. In questions in which I have more than 3 options, and they've asked me to consider the following, right? I have to read this. I need to jump to what they're asking for, and then I will tick or cross in these statements. Roots is somewhat helpful, and it is not necessary that bubbles have to be in air only. Bubbles can be water also. Bubble can be nutrient also, right? So it can be used in something to do with nutrient absorption. This feels okay-ish to me, so I'll make a different sign, right? That it feels okay, but I'm not sure. Assisting earthquake prediction by detecting movement of seismic waves. This I know for sure. When it has to do with earthquake, bubbles are not doing anything. So the way to check is that if nanobubble technology is going to be helpful, how? I want you to have trust in your intuition. So while you're doing test series, one of the things that you have to refine is that you'll often get this feeling that, oh, I read something about this. You will not remember where you studied it. You don't remember what source it was, but sometimes you'll get that intuition. While you're doing the test, I would want you to mark questions that you're doing by intuition. That I did this question by intuition and this is what it felt like. Aware. And the other fictive thing of how many questions you're solving through intuition. All right. So what is it about? It is a satellite-based internet service provider. Yes. And again, if Ukraine wanted the internet and Starlink gave it that, so this is the only option that's going to match. Then question 92. With reference to space technology, consider the following statements about rocket engine fuels. In this particular pattern of question, please remember to check 2-3 things. The first thing to check is that the original pattern was 2 statements and assertion reasoning. Most of you by exposure will feel that I know these options already, what the matrix is. But in last year's paper, we have seen that this pattern has been changed to include some questions with statement 1, statement 2, and statement 3, and then ABCD is going to change. So first thing I want you to do is I want you to check what pattern they have asked. Even though you would have seen this question, one of the easiest way for me to mess up your paper as a paper setter, for me to change a question as an examiner, is simply to change something here. Because you will not read this carefully. You will think that I know these options and you will not read it carefully. You will benchmark upon the basics that you have already practiced. But in terms of a serious paper giver, I want you to read the entire question from here to here. Verify that the pattern you think it is the one that has been asked. Right? Now, whenever this pattern is asked in the original way, the way to check it is you have to check statement 1, you have to check statement 2, and you have to check if it is the right reason. Right? So in my paper, if what I'm doing is correct, if I'm checking this paper, I have to see a tick mark here, and then I make this arrow that this is the reason, and I check this only. Only then this is going to be the correct answer. If This reason is wrong, the cross is here, and my answer changes. Right? If this is wrong, then again my answer changes. Again, the way that you engage and calculate in the paper is something that helps you process the paper well. It helps you protect yourself from making silly mistakes. All right. Now let's look at the question. Liquid fuel is preferred over solid fuels in the space rocket engines. Now, here you have to know whether or not this is true. You may know, you may not know, right? But you do know that the newer space rockets, the newer designs are preferring liquid. This so you know for sure. That means that it is an upgrade. This you would know for sure, right? So on basis of that, you can reassert the statement that okay, it feels okay because we are progressing towards that design, right? Then liquid fuel requires less storage space and is cheaper than solid fuel. Now, think of it this way: is it going to be cheaper than solid fuel? Doesn't seem likely because solid fuel you can just put, but liquid fuel requires those compressed cylinders and the pumps and the pipes and all those things. At least technology-wise, it is more sophisticated than solid fuel. Then less storage space or more storage space, this you may not know, right? But the truth is that because solid fuel has the oxidizer and the fuel together, it requires less space. But liquid fuel you have to carry the oxygen also. That's why it requires more space. Now, this means that my answer becomes one. Statement one is correct, but statement two is incorrect because liquid fuel requires more storage space and is more expensive than solid fuel. But it is used as an upgrade. For what reason? It is used as an upgrade because it has better regulation, it has better control when you're doing that, right? And it has greater efficiency, right? So my answer for question 92 is C. But what we have to learn is how to handle such patterns. How do you reassert some parts of the question, right? How to think. Then question 93. Consider the following submarines. Which of the following are classified as nuclear powered ballistic missile submarines in India? Again, a tabular format of mugging up this information is going to help you answer this question. See, the answer is it's Arihant and Arighat. Vikrant and Bakshir are not ballistic missile submarines. Vikrant is an aircraft carrier and Bakshir is a diesel submarine. Anyway, but the point is that what I want you to identify is that if you are not memorizing for prelims, reasons that you're not memorizing for prelims could be that you don't like this pattern, you want to study and you don't like mugging up things. Like, right, students will say that, ma'am, I'm very bad at learning. I can only understand through concepts, so I'm not going to do this. That is one problem. Some students are going to postpone learning these elements. That, okay, I will learn it close to the exam, right? Both of those are bad strategies. The good strategy is I want you to start memorizing right now so that from the entire portion, some things you know for sure. At the very least, your notes are generated. I told you in that question about the exercises, the notes have to be generated so that there is something that you're trying to learn. At least you know that, yes, it is useful. Plus, I want you to have visualization. If you're not memorizing this data in every mock test, you will lose out on one or two questions. Now, if you're the sort of student who falls behind the cutoff by one or two questions only, that means that it is this information that you refuse to memorize, which is ruining your attempt. So that seriousness is required. Memorization of the content is necessary, and it has to begin now because the volume of information that you have to memorize cannot happen in 2 weeks before the exam. You have to start now. You have to see what you know for sure, and because of that, while you're doing different test series, you will get tested in the way that you have to sort of retain and redact that information. Right? Not only do you have to learn, but you also have to use this information to answer questions. Huh? So for you to see how to use the things that you have memorized, it is necessary that you memorize, that you go to test, and then you see how well you are able to retain it or not. Okay. So the answer here is only 2, but again based on rote memorization. Then, question 94. Consider the following medical applications. Again, in how many of the above given applications can MRI be effectively used? What you have to know is what is the process of magnetic resonance imaging. What we do is that the MRI machine has a very large electromagnet, and the body part that has to be imaged is put inside that electromagnet, and the variation in the electromagnetic field in your body is seen, right? So your soft tissue of the body, in which there will be neurons and nerves, right? They will have electrical impulses for your nerves to communicate, and those sort of fields that are generated are the ones which are measured by the device. So measuring the metabolic rate of tumor cells. So metabolism happens because of the cells using energy and talking to the neurons. So that can be measured through the MRI. Then identification of nerve compression. Again, nerves, I told you, you can see. Detection of ligament tears in the muscles. If the ligament has been torn, the connections will not happen there, so it will be a dark area. So yes, they can also be visualized. So all 3 is the answer. But what helps me solve this question is knowing the concept of what the MRI is, right? So all these imaging techniques is something that you do have to prepare. Anything to do with general medicine, anything that you can go and ask for as a test, right? Be it a liver function test, be it a blood test, how that happens, what are the processes? This is something that you have to know in general science and awareness. Then question 95, with reference to glycemic index of food, which of the following statements is incorrect? Now, glycemic index, because it is the sort of topic which is in a lot of conversation on diet channels and weight loss discussions, it is necessary that you know it in this exam year because this is the year in which Ozempic, the entire issue has come up. So the entire thing of weight loss and different, especially insulin resistance related topics are well within the syllabus. So with reference to glycemic index, it measures the quality of carbohydrates in food. That is correct. Now, whenever you've been asked that, you have to look for incorrect. My method of doing it is I will only do right or wrong, which is the factual thing here, and from here I will pick the one which is incorrect, and that will become my answer. If you play with that, at least for me, it becomes confusing because then what you will do, you will think that okay, this statement is right, but in the context context of what is required is wrong, and then suddenly by here you will start to get confused. So it's better. I know this is true, and that's okay. Foods with high GI are digested faster than foods with low GI. Yes, consuming high GI foods increases the risk of developing type 2 diabetes. Correct. Dairy products have the highest GI among all food groups. No. So I know I'm looking for incorrect, and I know this is my answer. That is the way to do the question. Now for the topic of glycemic index, what is asked for us to do is that you eat food with low glycemic index, meaning that it should be food that is going to get digested slower. So when you're asked to eat say brown rice or brown bread as opposed to white rice, white bread, or refined carbohydrates, what you're trying to do is that I don't want my glucose spike to be a lot. It's not as if I want to eat food right now, right? Get a lot of energy in a short amount of time, and then my energy levels will crash, and then I eat more, right? So that's why something which has a very high glycemic index is something which will give you an insulin spike, blood sugar spike, right? As opposed to something with low GI, more complex foods which are digested slower. So slowly the energy is released. All right. Now, what are the foods which have highest glycemic index? Highest glycemic index is going to be for this thing, very refined food, right? Food which is purely starch, purely sugar, which is going to be directly digested by the body, right? The dairy products which have significant amount of fat do have lower glycemic indexes because they digest slowly. All right. So my answer here is D. My next question was consider the following statements about small modular reactors. Again, this is something that you have to study from concept point of view, right? So they define as reactors which have a power generation capacity up to 100 megawatt electrical. No, this is 1000. This is 300. So one is wrong. This gets eliminated. Always remember that elimination of the process is not going to change. If you know this fact for sure that it's wrong, the two other options which have one have to be eliminated immediately. Then India's Union Budget 25-26 has launched a nuclear energy mission which is focused on research and development of small modular reactor. Yes, I do two takes when there is a fact that I'm sure of completely. Not only that I know that this is true, I know this for sure. They require more frequent refueling than conventional nuclear reactors. This is the opposite, right? They can last for a very long time, and that's why they are selected to be deployed in regions which are cut off or remote. All right. So my answer becomes only two. Things from the budget you must be aware of very clearly by now that elements that are in the budget you do need to study them to the best of your capacity, right? The budget is a very core source. Budget and the survey are two of the most important sources for your prelims and again mains exam. Next question: post quantum cryptography is most appropriately discussed in the context of most important sources. So we need to study them to the that elements that are in the budget you do need to study them to the best of your capacity, right? The budget is a very core source. Budget and the survey are two of the most important sources. They require more frequent refueling than conventional nuclear reactors. This is the opposite, right? They can last for a very long time, and that's why they are selected to be deployed in regions which are cut off or remote. All right. So my answer becomes only two. Things from the budget you must be aware of very clearly by now that elements that are in the budget you do need to study them to the best of your capacity, right? The budget is a very core source. Budget and the survey are two of the most important sources for your prelims and again mains exam. Next question: post quantum cryptography is most appropriately discussed in the context of. Now, some of you will be aware, but I have to do this question in assuming that you don't know anything about this. So post quantum matlab after quantum technology, what sort of cryptography we're going to have? Now, quantum computing, you know that instead of the binary system of regular computing, quantum is going to work on the base of 4 or even more, right? It has different other principles of superposition, right, and entanglement, and because of which the quantum computer will be able to solve our regular computer, digital computer problems very quickly. So the problem was that anyone who develops the quantum computer first will be able to break all cryptography in the world, right? That is the idea. When we are saying post quantum, that means cryptography that is secure in the quantum computer field also, right? The locks, the codes that are generated that are difficult even for the quantum computer to solve. That is what they're talking about here. So enhancing the speed of data transmission in quantum networks. No, cryptography is not to do with data speed. Securing data against potential future attacks from quantum computers. Okay, but let's see the other options. Improving efficiency of quantum technology for cryptocurrency transactions. No. Developing new quantum methods for data compression and storage. No. So D though we know for sure, A we know for sure is wrong. Some people will get stuck on C also, that it has to do with cryptocurrency transactions, right? Whereas this is securing data against potential future attack. What I want you to check is cryptography is for data protection, not just cryptocurrency, which means that option B is more broad in this thing. in its meaning as compared to option C, which is why we're going to select option B because it links more to the technology. And otherwise, also in terms of trends, UPSC tends to lean towards the broader option. All right, so that's my answer, option B. Question 98, which of the following statements is correct with reference to in vitro gametogenesis? Now, whether or not you're aware of this technology, again, what we have to do for biotech is, I want you to break this word down. In vitro means in test tube, right? We study in vivo and in vitro. In vivo means living, in vitro means outside the body. So in test tube, this we know. Then gametogenesis. So it is genesis of the gametes. So what are we trying to do? We are trying to generate the gametes, which are the sex cells in what? In a test tube. This is from the word only we are able to pick up the meaning. While you're studying biotechnology and biology, I want you to learn the meaning of the terms by breaking the word down wherever possible. That will help you identify what the different terms are meaning. Now, it is a process of generating functional eggs of sperm in laboratories, setting through induced pluripotent stem cells of individuals. So these functional eggs of sperm in laboratories setting eggs of the right? The ART Act limits the age of 62 IgG in India, sure, but unlike in vitro fertilization, does not require any kind of biological contribution. That cannot happen. It increases the risk of genetic disorders in high offspring by including harmful genetic traits. So that cannot happen, right? So the only thing that we have to get stuck on is it that ART Act 2021 limits the age for using IVG. No, it is IVF that the act is limiting, right? So who is using IVF technology is something which is limited by the act, not IVG. But again, that is incidental. The option that matches most is option A because this is the meaning of the technology and that is something that you can take out from the name. So what we learned is that in context of the subjects that we're doing in terms of biology, because you are required to learn a lot of terms and terminology. Right? Etymology is going to be your friend. Try to break the words down so that will help you remember these aspects. Alright. As you get in the future tests, please try and use these tests and test series to see where you stand in your preparation. Try not to let it affect your motivation and morale because please remember there is still time left for your exam. You can study everything that is required, but it is necessary that you identify where the gaps are. What are the things that you have to correct? If you seek help from our mentors and teachers, that can also be something which will help you address your gaps. Right? So don't get too obsessed about worrying about your problems. We have to obsess about solving our problems. Right? That's all from me today. Thank you. See you soon.
So hello everyone. Now we are going to discuss the questions of geography and environment. Let's start with the first question. The question is, it is about oceans. The question is saying, with reference to horizontal distribution of the temperature in oceans, consider these two statements. The statement one says, in higher latitudes, open seas have relatively cooler temperature and open seas. Now, to understand this question, I'm giving you this example. For example, there are two ports. The one port is bigger, the second port is smaller, right? If I put this two ports in case of, let's consider this is nothing but open sea. The bigger one is open sea. This is nothing but the enclosed sea, which is surrounded by the land. Now, if the two this type of oceans are found near the tropics where the sunlight is very high, okay, sorry, and yes, and what was it? ठीक है, पानी नहीं है, ठीक है, हाँ, इसमें कमरे में बाहर बचे हैं तो आवाज आ जाएगी. So hello everyone, we are going to discuss the questions from geography and environment in this session. So let's start with the question directly. The first question is from oceanography and here the question is about the horizontal distribution of the temperature. Now, two statements are given. One is saying in high latitudes, open seas have relatively cooler temperature. Okay. Now to understand this concept, proceed here. This is nothing but enclosed sea. Now, if you are aware about the insolation and the temperature, where the insolation will be maximum around this, let's say tropics, this is the highest, let's say insolation zone. Now, if in this zone, just consider I am putting these two ports. What will happen? Where the temperature will increase quickly. Of course, if I will put these two bodies, that is water bodies, the smaller one will gain the temperature quickly. So the enclosed water bodies in the lower tropics will show you more temperature compared to the open water bodies. Now, if we consider the upper latitudes, somewhat here, in this upper latitudes, what happens is there is less of insolation now. The temperature will be slightly lesser compared to this area. Now, again, we have the two water body. One is open, one is enclosed. One is bigger, the second is smaller. If I ask you one simple thing, if I put these two water bodies here, let's say A and B, now tell me where more temperature can be found, or just consider where the water will freeze quickly. Answer would be B. Why? Because it is smaller, and it will show you the quick change compared to the bigger water body, that is open sea. So in that way, you can consider the bigger bodies or the open water bodies will have more temperature in upper latitudes, right? So what the statement is saying, in higher latitudes, open seas are relatively cooler. Therefore, you can reject this statement outrightly. This is very important concept. So this is not true. The statement one is incorrect. What the second statement is saying, the temperature of surface water decreases from the equator towards the pole. Yes, in general, what happens is because insolation decreases from equator to pole, similar way, in general, what happens is the ocean surface temperature will also decrease from equator to the poles. Very simple it is. However, you have to consider this is here in the subtropics, the maximum temperatures will be recorded. Why? Because of this is the reason where there is sinking winds are found, number one. Second, there is no rainfall. Mostly this is the dry belt. And because of this two region, the water temperature will also increase in this area. But in general, from equator to pole, temperature will decrease because insolation will decrease. So answer should be, I think statement one is incorrect. So what is the, yes, so answer should be D. Answer is D. Now, if we go to the second question, the second question is about albedo. What is albedo? Albedo is the reflection capacity. Means if a surface reflects back insolation, how much of the insolation is reflected back? That is considered as the capacity of reflection or albedo. Now, about albedo, this is nothing but reflection capacity of any surface, right? Now, if you go by this reflection capacity, you may be familiar that if the brighter would be the object, whiter if it is the object, it will radiate and reflect more and more sun energy or insolation back into the atmosphere and space. It means if I ask you, let's say there is snow, which is fresh, take a very bright in color, so it will have the highest albedo. Yes. Then if I say old snow, second we can say in position. Then if I ask you desert, desert is also having, let's say, high albedo. Then after that, let's say the grasslands, right? And the finally would be the forest. So now you can see this is the order. The highest albedo is in the whiter object, the snow. Okay. Now, if we read the statement, the first statement says the albedo of desert is higher than the tropical evergreen forest. It is correct. You can see here the deserts will have the more albedo compared to the forest. Yes, it is true. Then what is the second statement? The high albedo, this is true. The high albedo of a surface is due to its ability to absorb. It's not about ability to absorb. It is reflection capacity, not the absorption capacity. So second is incorrect. What should be the answer? One is correct, second is incorrect. So the answer is one is correct, but the second statement. Yeah, that is one to be the answer. One is correct, second is incorrect. So the answer is one is correct, but the second statement. Yeah, that is about 75% of world's active volcanoes are concentrated in Pacific Ring of Fire. That is true. Why its name is Pacific Ring of Fire? Because most of the time you will see there are volcanic eruptions continuously which are going on. If you see this diagram, let's say this is the North America. Here, if I make, let's say here it is the North America, right? Then we have the South America. What you will see here, you will see Mountain Hood, Mountain Shasta, Mountain Rainier, in US. Here you will see Mountain Cotopaxi exactly on equator. Here you will see Mountain, let's say, Aconcagua, the highest one, right? There are so many this type of mountains which are found in this entire belt. Let's say this Philippine is known for Mountain Neon. Then Japan is famous for volcanic eruption. So what you can observe here, you will observe this in this entire area, we have so much of the volcanic eruption activities. Why this eruption is going on? Because in this entire area, the subduction of especially one oceanic plate, which is nothing but your Pacific plate, is going on. The Pacific plate is subducting under the continental plates or the other plates because it is the Pacific which is heaviest, denser. Why it is heaviest and denser? Because it is entirely oceanic in nature. Most of the other plates are the example of mixture. There you will have the both continental part as well as oceanic part. But in case of Pacific, it is entirely Pacific or oceanic it is, and therefore it is the densest and the heaviest plate out of other all plates. So wherever it will interact with the other plates, it is the Pacific which will go down under the another. Okay, so because of the subduction, what happens is this is nothing but convergence is going on. Convergence, you may be familiar with this convergence. What is convergence? When the two plates come closer to each other. This convergence can be of three types. One is OC, the most common type. Then it is, let's say, CC. OC is nothing but you will find more commonly around this Pacific Ring of Fire. Most of the areas you will have the OC. Pacific is going down under the continental North American plate, right? CC is the example of Himalayas rise. Most of the fold mountains that you see, alpine fold mountains, they are of CC origin. Then one more, that is OO. OO will create the islands, the volcanic island arcs in the oceans. For example, Japan, Caribbean, Indonesian islands, they all are the example of origin of O and O. Okay, so what the question is saying? The question is asking, see here, 75% of world's active volcanoes are concentrated in Ring of Fire. That is true. The Pacific Ring of Fire is predominantly characterized by convergent plate boundary. This is also true. Convergence is going on. Both of them are true. So what is the answer? Both are true. And the second is correct explanation of the first one. Then next is correct explanation. So what is the answer? Both are true. And the second is correct explanation of the first one. Then next is consider the following. And now the question is asking what of them are the example of diastrophism. Now what is diastrophism? Before that, I'm just telling you the Earth movement. The Earth movement is caused by two reasons. One is when the forces are coming from within the Earth, they are known as endogenetic forces. And when they are operating outside from the Earth, then they are known as exogenetic or exogenic forces. In the endogenetic forces, we have, let's say, diastrophic and catastrophic forces. Catastrophic forces. Now, what is diastrophic? These are slow forces which are known for building of continents and mountains. Okay, so these are nothing but the continent building forces or the mountain building forces. They can also be classified in, let's say, number one, the folding, we can say aperogenic and orogenic. Aperogenic means when they are making continents. Orogenic means when they are making mountains. Aperogenic can again be classified into two ways. Now, before going into this one, it is inside the diastrophism we are entering. Diastrophic, you have to remember, it is the slow operating forces known for the continent or the mountain building, and they are coming from within the earth. Means endogenetic forces they are. Now here you can classify, see here, the submergence, emergence, emergent forces, submergent forces. Here you can have the folding and faulting. Okay, so folding will create fold mountain, for example, Himalaya. Faulting will create the block mountain, for example, Satpura, Vindhya, Vosges, Black Forest, Salt Range of Pakistan. They all are the example of the block mountains, right? So these type of forces will be classified under diastrophic forces. Here you can have catastrophic means very quick they are in nature. Second, mostly they will be associated with destruction. For example, tsunami. For example, earthquake also. But see here, in let's say earthquake, we can also say earthquake can be also the part of diastrophic movement. For example, if there is folding is going on and the Himalayas are being, let's say, built up, in that case, if the earthquakes are occurring, then they will be considered as the part of diastrophic forces. However, more technically, they are the part of catastrophic forces. Okay? Because they will occur suddenly, and most of the times they will be associated with what? Destruction. However, if the earthquakes are associated with the folding, faulting, mountain building, such type of earthquakes can become the part of diastrophism. Now consider this one. And one more thing, this side. Now in this side, we have, let's say, these are also known as denudational forces. Denudational means the forces which are lowering down the surfaces. Lowering down means, for example, here the examples would be, let's say, weathering, erosion, and mass movement. For example, in the mass movement, you have the landslide, landfall, all these things. So they come under this exogenic forces. Now they are not building something; they are rather reducing something. They are making the plane features. Okay? For example, if there is a mountain over a period of time due to weathering, erosion, mass movement, what can happen? It can be, let's say, eroded in such a magnificent, let's say, amount. For example, Aravallis. Once they were known for highest fold mountains, but nowadays they are only existing as a relic fold mountain. Yes or no? Yes. So these are destructive forces, right? Now, if you consider by this, just see here, formation of Rift Valley. What they are asking, diastrophism. So Rift Valley means they are created with the fault. Can I say this is the example of diastrophism process? Rift Valley creation, block mountain creation, this is the part of the faulting, and this is also the part of diastrophism. Weathering, answer is no, because weathering is in the exogenetic side and not in diastrophic process. So weathering of rock, no. Erosion, of course, no. Occurrence of landslide. Now see here, landslide is mass movement. Okay, so because of this, it is classified under the mass movement. So mass movement is not the part of diastrophism, rather it is the part of the other side. Therefore, this is also not the answer. So how many statement I think it is asking correct they are? So the one statement is the correct. The one is formation of rift valleys. So only one statement is true. Next question is, yes, it is about distribution of atmospheric pressure across hemisphere. Consider the following statement. In the northern hemisphere, pressure belt shift northward during summer and southward during winter. That is true. Now, for example, you may have seen this, you can understand with the example of, let's say, India's monsoon. You may have seen, let's say, this is somewhat equator, geographical equator. So what happens in the June, you may be familiar with this phenomena. This ITCZ, that is the monsoonal trough, will shift over the plains of India. And therefore, what happens is monsoon, that is nothing but modified trade winds are attracted to India. This is somewhat I'm telling you about June and July, right? In June, it will be exactly over this plains of India. Now, what will happen after June when the summer solstice is gone? The sun will go, means apparently it will go in the southern hemisphere. So, therefore, what will happen? Because sun was here somewhat, the ITCJ shifted here. Now the sun is moving towards the another hemisphere. This is apparent movement of the sun. It seems like sun is moving, but it is not the sun which is moving. It is the earth which is revolving around the sun, and hence I am using the term apparent movement of the sun. Now, when the sun is going into the southern hemisphere, what happens is this ITCJ will also shift in the southern world. So this is true. In the northern hemisphere, the pressure belt will shift during the northern summer. In which side? In the northward side, and southward side in the winter. That is true. What is the second statement that says in the southern hemisphere, high pressure system develop over landmass in January? Now, when we take, let's say, southern hemisphere, now, just consider January is their summer month. It is not winters for them. It is winters for us. So if it is the summer in your land, for example, you can consider the example of India. Let's say if it was the summer, June here, over India's landmass, what type of pressure we do have? We had low pressure. So in summers, because of increasing temperature on the land, low pressure systems will be built up. What he is saying in this statement, that in the summer of southern hemisphere, high pressure system will develop over the landmass. It is incorrect. In summers, low pressure systems will build up. So what you have to be very careful with, just consider this is southern hemisphere summer. Okay? Don't be confused with this January month. Otherwise, what you will understand, this January is winter, and winter means high anticyclone or high pressure systems can be there over the land. It is incorrect. So second statement is not true. In both hemisphere, the equatorial region is characterized by doldrum. Yes. So what is doldrum? I'm erasing this one. Now see here. What is doldrum? Doldrum is nothing but the calm zone in between the trade winds, right? So for example, if this is the equator, what happens is the trade winds will come from subtropical